Hey, welcome to My Modern Myth, by the way. I'm Eric and this is Adam, whichever side he is on me, because I should just go the opposite. There he is, even though that's the exact wrong way to point. I guarantee in the episode you'll be correct. So,
hey, there's the thumbnail, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, nailing it. So we're talking about rebranding today, and it's not the traditional, I guess, rebrand where it's strictly your business. It's yourself. It's your story. It's your storyline. You could think of it as pivoting into a new direction. How do you take control of your narrative and rebrand your life so that you can walk forward in this new path? And just starting out, we were talking about lighting and how you change the color of your light to match your brand in a business sense, and how you're going to outsource certain things. And all of it communicates a different message depending on what you want. So if you're not on YouTube, that's going to make no sense why we're giggling and oohing and eyeing. But I have a few steps to walk through on how I rebrand. And this is from the perspective primarily of lessons learned through self-development and how I try and create forward movement in my life, because ultimately, if you get that personally, you can get that in business and in sport and whatever other areas you're trying to, because who is the vehicle that's moving through all those spaces? It's you. So
me?
It's you, Adam. You are, I mean, that's a lot of work for you to be in control of every single human being's personal narrative and personal brand. So how do you do it?
Well, I'll tell you, what I just did with my lighting is a perfect example of how I do it, and I do it poorly. Because I'll make one change, thinking this is going to not affect everything else, and then it screws the whole thing up, and I don't remember how to go back to where it was like actually working. But I think it's if I'm which is what I was doing, fumbling around with the lighting, and yeah, now I look a little orange, but that's okay. But you know, the way I think about rebranding is I think that we're always in a form of change. And so when I think of rebranding, I mean, I don't know if it's like really a thing that happens, except it's just an adaptation. And so we interpret this word of rebranding as like, well, we're going to make a significant dramatic change and change everything. But in reality, it's just it may be just a pivot. And I think they're necessary. It's not a failure to rebrand, in my opinion. I mean, we throw things out at the wall, and I think we talked about last week or maybe the week before about iterations. And iterations are an important thing to accept and acknowledge and be okay with, because nothing's going to be perfect at first, and we have to always be evolving. So yeah, in whatever we're doing, and I think that's
always be evolving.
ABE.
That's the shirt. So yeah. I agree with you, and the iteration is going to come into play later too, because that's really what we're doing at any moment in time. And the first thing I like to do is to iterate. You have to understand where you are. So it's like this moment in time where we talked about it in a previous episode about the story you're crafting, what narrative you're living, and having that. Usually it's a intense moment of self-reflection. You've had enough, because a lot of times we don't know the direction we're going, because we're just marching down the road and have no idea that the unconscious mind might be driving us in that direction, and we call it fate. That's what Carl Jung would say, which I love. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. So when we get to that moment of stopping, we can understand where we are, and then we can start to think about where we want to go. I think that's the foundational element of this whole process. And, for me, jiu-jitsu. I've wanted to do that for a long time. It wasn't part of my quote-unquote personal brand. It was triathlon. So I get to that point where triathlon isn't working, and I'm just beating my head up against a wall, and I'm hurting myself, and I'm stressed, and I'm failure. I'm not good enough to run my nonprofit, and it just spirals into all these things. Well, it's time for a rebrand. It's time to check in and figure out what's real, what's false. And so the false was, I'm doing something and trying to put the vision so deep and so big in a way that I'm not going to do any of the required work to get there. And you talk about that all the time, that if you can't, reverse engineer it and start taking those steps for reasons of your life isn't going to adapt to this, and it's not the best thing for you to try and make adapt, maybe you got to walk a different way. Why are you doing it? That's the other thing, is we're going to ask ourselves why. Why do I have to be an elite triathlete? Well, because I started a nonprofit for endurance sport. That's why. Mm-hmm. That's a crappy reason. Like, that's silly. That imprisons me into a path that I'm going to write a really bad story, because what I want to do is fight. I want to wrestle. Like, that's more of my speed. And that's as far away from endurance sport as you can get.
Right.
It's like long distance running or grappling.
Yeah.
Very different.
And interestingly, I mean, that's the path I took too. We both kind of like went down that path of going to something completely different from triathlon. And my rebrand went into karate, but I actually just talked about this on a podcast that I just recorded for a few weeks from now. And that particular episode was on the art of mastery, like just how to master things. Like, people are asking, like, how do you do so many things and like try to get good at them? And I think you and I both have that ability, not to brag, but to brag.
Just brag about humble brags, right?
Right. But we have this ability to pick up a new thing, a new skill, and just kind of go with it, and then get pretty good at it. And I think it's somewhat, it's a skill, but it's also a discipline that we have. When we want to get good at something, we pursue it. And there's something of an art to that. And it's also related to rebranding, because if we stick ourselves in a box, which a lot of people do, I think a lot of people put themselves in a box like, I am this is my identity. I play the cello, and that's all I'm ever going to play, and that's what I am. I'm a cellist. And so you can never play the banjo or the mandolin or something that's out of your box, right? But if you open the box and you look at what's in the box, what's in the box?
What's in the box?
You know, what's in the box?
Come on, man.
You look outside the box, but you see like all of the different things that you can do, become, and try. And that mastery, it's not a 10,000 hour thing. It's just spend some time, get to that 90% level, get to that 80% level of competency. Decide if it's if it's the right thing, if it's the right thing for your brand, and either scrap it or do it or go all in and get that rest of the 20%. But that's kind of like how we pursue life. We just experiment, we iterate, and then we find the right balance of everything so that we can enjoy it.
Yeah, that's step 2 is you're deciding where you want to go, and now you have to decide what things you need to bring around you. And this is important in my philosophy, that it has to be things that stimulate your mind and your body. Not necessarily each one has to do, like jiu-jitsu for me does both. It makes you think, it makes you reflect, and it tests your physical limits. It strengthens you. It does both. But you have to bring in the things that you enjoy around this new path, whatever it is. And one thing that I've learned is, if I pivot to jiu-jitsu, I have to have strong other habits outside of jiu-jitsu, because inevitably I'm going to be sick. I'm going to have something where I can't go, or I'm going to be failing, quote unquote. I'm struggling in jiu-jitsu, but I have this other stuff in my life to fill me up too, because it's irresponsible for us to think that the honeymoon phase that you'll talk about will last forever. And it doesn't mean that our passion dies, that we're doing the wrong thing. It just means we put everything into that basket when we first got that seed of inspiration. It's all about slowly sipping and drinking from that fountain and bringing that list of things, saying, here's where I want to go. Now I'm going to step back and I'm going to list all the stuff that I love. And some of that stuff I'm not doing right now. Some of it I am doing. And I'm going to list the stuff that I'm doing that I absolutely don't want to do. And then you start to define what you can bring forward and what you have to set aside, what you have to outsource, which I think we'll get into later for like maybe what you're doing and what I'm doing professionally. But the key for me has been jiu-jitsu can't be my life. My modern myth can't be my life. I've added drums into that mix. That can't be my life. But each piece of that is a part of that pie of life that brings me fulfillment in different ways. I'm moving my body in different ways. I'm moving my mind in different ways. And I'm constantly connected daily to something. I don't go to class every day. I don't lift weights every day. I don't make podcasts or brand identities and courses every day. But I'm also a father. I'm also a husband. I'm doing all these other things. So when you're talking about how you can do so much, the reality is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we're very similar. The reason that you can, or I can, is because we've connected in some way consistently, maybe not daily, but consistently to those things that we love. And oftentimes those things were already there for us in childhood, just like music.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely were. And I mean, I think that there's merit to the idea that when you pick something up early on in life, there's a muscle memory. And if you have something that's highly translatable, you know, you can translate it over to something like that. Like you mentioned drums. Now you've got that baseline foundation of rhythm, which, you know, you could take somewhere else. I don't have that foundation. I never had much rhythm. So picking up the drums would be very difficult for me. But I think that there's aspects of like, how can I get that rhythm? Then I can apply that rhythm to dancing, to, you know, certain other skills. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, I think it's right that you don't want to do these things every single day, because we get trapped in this idea that when we go into something, we have to be all in. And again, this goes back to the message that we're sold from the standpoint of society. Anything that we have to buy is a marketing program at the very first, because it has to get in front of our eyes. And because of that, it is selling you on being all in, on being aggressive, on pushing 110%, so that it turns into this burnout fest, that it is the only thing, because they have to justify it by being hard or sexy or whatever. But the unsexy nature of actually doing anything or rebranding or anything like that is that it's very unsexy at first. It's all foundation. It's all fundamentals. It's all just practicing the scales or practicing the rat-a-tat-tats or the is that what they do in drumming? I don't know. Maybe it's
a
doop
doop rat-a-tat-tats. Just move on. Yeah.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Is it rat-a-tat-tat
Eric,
or
are you doing the rat-a-tat-tats? Are you practicing them rat-a-tats? The radiddles? Yeah, some radiddles.
Well, paradiddles and they have some funny names, so you're not far off.
Ba-dum-ba-dums. Okay.
Ba-dum-pa-pum-pum. 'Tis the season.
Come Beethoven. But yeah, that's.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
I had Dwight Schrute in my head. You ever get that where something's in your head and you're like, I have to finish it?
Oh yeah,
5,
absolutely.
6, 7. Okay, continue.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you walk by when you walk by a doorway and you try to touch the ceiling or the door threshold and you miss it. No, you're going back and touching it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you can't. Nobody's level of OCD is that low that they can just walk past and be okay with that. But no, yeah. So I think that's. I mean, the foundational pieces, the fundamentals, the boring stuff is what starts that off. And anything else, anytime we're going to rebrand on something, those fundamentals are going to be highly unsexy, incredibly unsexy. So that it's like the baseline of, oh, I'm going to start posting a daily dad joke or something like that. It's like, okay, well now I've got to like plan out first, like what's this, what's that. It's not just like I'm jumping into recording those. It takes some level of, discipline, but that's how you get good at things. So
absolutely. Yep. And the unsexy nature of fundamentals, we'll say, is something we talked about in the past too, that my coach at class last night, I had asked him a question and he responded to me about this all levels class, intermediate, all the different types of classes we can do in jiu-jitsu, and the difference in when you would want to do one versus the other. Because I'm in fundamentals now by choice. And the reason I'm in fundamentals is because I'm still learning every single day that I go there. So if I ever stopped, I'd be like, well, maybe I should be going somewhere else. But the fundamentals is all you fundamentally need to be proficient at anything in life.
100%.
And so I told you about that violin player who was practicing scales, and those scales were beautiful. And if you can get to a level where you can find the fundamental beauty, we call it, then you're winning, because you've stripped it down to such a raw level where you're like falling in love with the foundational elements of whatever you're building. And that takes, I believe, time and age and patience. I didn't have that until my 30s. Probably not until now. And I think there's a brain development, there's a growth thing that has to happen, and then you revisit these things that you couldn't stand before. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm just having a blast trying to keep time on the drums. Whereas it used to be my least favorite thing, throw a metronome on? No, that's horrible, because showed me all of my flaws and how
Sure.
much I would rush every
Right.
drum fill on beat, and then all of a sudden you're rushing. Oh, I suck. Instead of saying, okay, let's scale it back. Let's keep trying until but when you groove on time, you feel it. You're connected to it, and that's the fundamentals. That if you connect to the baseline operation of what you're doing, you feel it. It is a connected, and that is sexy because there's nothing more sexy than connection, and that's something that comes with time. And so, yeah, we're kids. We're going crazy, but now is the time when we're in our 30s. It's time to like settle down and go back to those fundamentals. You have your 20s to be crazy and kind of go somewhere. Now it's time. That's why I don't want to say I hate targeting people because it sounds like predatory. What's your target market? I'm like, oh, gross. I don't like those 30-year-olds. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
30 to 40. That's
Oh,
my target
yeah.
market.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned the fundamentals piece, or talked about the fundamentals being so important to getting to a point where you can master anything, because that's so true. If you can get the fundamentals down, that 80% is the fundamentals. I mean, every one of us wants to jump in and immediately play like the most rocking drum solo ever. That's what we hear. That's the sexy part that tells us that this is what we want to do. And so we jump on the drums, and when we don't get to do that within a week of playing the drums, we're pissed off because we can't do that.
Facts.
But the more we get down the fundamentals, like if we just focus on those for the first 80% of our entire existence as a drummer, well, then we have more capability to actually handle those kinds of things later on, and then some, and more, and consistently. It's just the way it works. Hit the fundamentals, and everything will be easier in the long term. And once you get the fundamentals down for drumming, you can apply that rhythm to dancing. You can apply that rhythm to this, to that. Same with like if you play the piano, you get the fundamentals for piano. You can apply it to the guitar, to the banjo, to the ukulele, to whatever you want to apply it to, because the same fundamentals are there that are in those other instruments. It just takes a little bit of a different muscle memory to figure them out. But you still accelerate that learning process.
Absolutely. And I think the funny thing is you demystify when you learn, and you look at any sport, jiu-jitsu, or I'll say jiu-jitsu and drums. We'll talk about those two. When you start to learn...
It's a new name of the show, Jiu-Jitsu and Drums.
Yes. All of a sudden, 20,000 people just subscribed. Awesome. Okay. Pivot, rebrand. Forget self-development. We're talking jiu-jitsu and drums.
I'm sorry, but that actually sounds like an awesome show. Like just jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu.
Well, one of my last coaches, he is a really good drummer too. So I was like, of course you are, because there's synchronicities that, for me at least, show me I'm on the right path for whatever I'm choosing to do. Doesn't mean it lasts forever, but in that season, I'm like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And whatever happens, I'm going to be able to find a way through and be empowered and learn something from it, because this universal nod says, hey, all of these coincidences, they're not really coincidences. They're affirmations that you're doing the right things. And in drums and jiu-jitsu, I've seen world champions roll. I've seen amazing drummers drum, and I've learned through YouTube and different areas. And you always think that there's this magic element that makes them so good. And then they slow it down for you, and they're just doing fundamentals really well and really fast. And so, you think that in jiu-jitsu or drums, your goal is, like you said, in a week, just to spaz your way into greatness. I'm just going to play, and then when it's time for me to do my drum film, oh, that sounded horrible.
Right.
Well, you don't realize they're going left, right, left, right. You don't realize that it's really simple when you think about it. It's really complex, because that simplicity has to be drilled and defined and have limb interdependence or independence. And same with jiu-jitsu. I've seen that sweep before, but when you're a high-level competitor, you're able to do this move on a very good competitor at full strength, because you've developed the fundamentals. You didn't spaz your way to the top. And so that next step, once you've figured these things out and brought those things back into your life, and you kind of have the direction of where you want to go, is you have to throw out the timeline. That's what I was always looking at timelines and be like, in a year, where am I going to be? Well, for me, it doesn't work. I have to throw out the timeline and just be here today and say, what do I need to do today? Okay, tomorrow, what am I going to do tomorrow? because I know where I'm going. And as long as you have that direction, you're going to be ingesting things you need to become better. And you're dedicating yourself to falling in love with the fundamentals, just the basics. And those basics stack and stack until you're doing greatness. And there's no timeline on that. I might be amazing at jiu-jitsu in a year. I'm not, but I'm further along than I thought it would be. I would say, like, what am I going to say in 5 years? I want to be this belt. No, I really don't care, because it's all about just progression. I got the drum set and I had that moment, like I do every single time. Maybe I'm gifted all of a sudden. Maybe I'm just going to get it. Have that moment. Yeah. Get frustrated, then laugh at yourself. You have to laugh at the ridiculous naivete that you were just going to master this thing right away, and then throw out the timeline and say, if I really love this, calendars don't matter, because it doesn't matter how long it takes me to get there. I think you got to Kona in 6 years?
4 years.
4 years.
Don't count me short, Eric.
I know. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. How dare you? It's still 4 years to me is ridiculous. Like, that is so fast to get there. And I was hoping maybe 6 years. Well, it never happened, but 4 years is a phenomenal timeline. Really awesome. I got to 15 hours in 3 years, I think, of training. So you got to, what was your fastest time?
Fastest was about 9:27 and some change.
Freaking impressive. Yeah. Like, that's phenomenal to think about that, because I've done the 15-hour one. So I know.
And on the reverse side, I feel like that's like a more incredible feat, because you're racing for twice the amount of time, plus like it's not like you're suffering any less. I mean, you're putting in the same effort. That's a lot. I mean, so it's an incredible feat regardless of how long it takes you. I mean, it's still something that most people in the world are not doing. So
sure. And it's still remarkable if it got you got to the championship in 4 years or 10. Like, it's still remarkable.
100%.
You got to the championship. That's so rare. So if we can get rid of the calendar versus just what we have to get done this week, well, you can start to make progress, and you're going to have hopefully developed friends in your life that can maybe mirror that to you. Like, you've been that to me, or I've been that for you. And someone who for a long term has seen you over 6 years or something, and be like, wow, here's where we've gone. But the idea of throwing away the calendar is also, I think, unsexy, because people really like to, I think, attach it to a timeline. And this, in 90 days, I'll be washboard abs, or, you know, whatever. And then once that timeline is here, I've either failed or succeeded. I'm like, no, the timeline is just there. Now it's just an arbitrary date that we picked. And it's nice to have that long vision, but I just find so much more value in determining the path and then beginning to walk down it, because then you're still free to pivot and not feel so, you know, like you have to grip onto this thing, and really you should have gone left and pivoted to drums. But no, I said piano. I said I was going to nail the piano, but there's so much joy on the drums. Well, you're still in music. You're still working towards it, but you missed the pivot. You missed the exit ramp, and you're going to feel tension, and you're going to end up crashing that narrative, that story, that rebrand. So I don't know. It sounds unsexy, but to me, it's very life-giving.
It's life-giving for sure. I 100% agree with that. I think that this is the beauty of creating that foundational piece. The beauty of creating that foundational piece is that you are getting the 80% that you need to get in order to become competent at whatever it is that you're trying to pursue. And a rebrand is not going to be some life-changing thing, but the way that's a great way to rebrand or set yourself up for a rebrand is because when you have that foundational piece satisfied, it is easier to rebrand, because you've already got those foundations, those fundamentals in, so that when you create it, if you wanted to rebrand this podcast into Drums and Jiu-Jitsu, you've already got the equipment, you've already got the microphone, you've already got the skill set to be a host of a podcast. All you have to do is switch up some of the content and shake it up a bit, and find that new target audience that you find so creepy, and then and then just start to do it, start to experiment, start to move in that direction, because you already have those foundational skills. So I think the point is with that, when you're starting out, don't fret so much about perfecting the brand. just start.
Yep.
Just start. And then get the fundamentals down, get the reps in. And then you can start to build it. Don't focus on the calendar, like you're saying. Don't focus on the likes. Don't focus on the views and all that kind of stuff that both you and I are focused on, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's just keep getting the reps in, keep getting those in, and rebrand, pivot, iterate, and then once it hits, it just you just keep going, and the consistency, the endurance will eventually win.
As much as we like to think we're above analytics and metrics, we're not.
No.
I feel like there's an endurance element of that where I can ignore that for so long, but then inevitably you get to a point where we as humans need to understand that what we're doing matters or that people care. And metrics, unfortunately, are one of those things that we look to when we start to burn out a little bit. I think there's some correlation to a mental state that we get to of exhaustion or fatigue, and maybe there's something else you want to get done, but you're dedicated to this and it's just not going well. So you look to see if it is going well, and then you're like, nope, I knew it. My 10-minute video, everyone clicked out by 30 seconds, so like there's this defeatist kind of mentality. But what you mentioned about the fundamentals of speaking or the gear that it takes to be able to then pivot the podcast, it reminded me of this other idea of where are your strengths, and then you do what your strengths dictate you do. And I think that's right, but I would critique that and say, where are you fundamentally strong? What is the thing that you have that other people maybe notice about you from a personality perspective? I've had people compliment me being funny, like, oh man, you must just laugh all the time at your house. And I've had people talk about, they feel seen or they feel comfortable talking to me about things that they don't usually talk to people about. So these are fundamental strengths. I don't do anything to practice those. They're just innate things that are just part of who I am. And I think we all have that. And we tend to start to look at what we desire instead of what impacts us. And when we are impacted, we want to impact someone that same way. So I might see your puns and be like, I want to start doing puns because that's awesome and it's making me happy. So I want to make other people happy. Well, that's not where I'm fundamentally strong. I'll do puns with you, but I'm not going to then go start a pun channel or something. So we have to delineate between our fundamental strengths and things that are impactful to us that we can just have as hobbies. For me, making puns to my kids, absolutely, I'm going to do that. But I'm not going to put it out there as my strength, because the next step in this process is pursuing the path quietly. We don't want to tell everybody every new shift. And I did this every time I had a new idea, a new rebrand, a new direction. All right, everybody, here's what's happening, and then you last for 2 weeks and then it collapses. And then all of a sudden you start to betray people's trust. People are like, okay, what's the new gimmick? So there also is an element of you have to get really comfortable making these moves in the background, just quietly putting stuff out. You're just tweaking here and there. That's why, and we'll get into it, the pause, pivot, pursue method for me has been fundamentally how I've changed my life. It just doesn't sound as sexy.
Yeah. I don't know. Pause, pivot, pursue sounds pretty sexy to me. Tell us more, Eric Beach.
Yeah. Well, you have to do it, because if you don't and you do drastic change, like we've said, you crash your life. And this is a lesson from triathlon that I'll always hold, in that the bike is designed geometrically to stay upright. It is oftentimes the rider that crashes the bike because it's forcing the bike to do something that's unnatural to the bike. He's gripping too hard. He's putting it into a turn too fast, or whatever. It's rider error that typically is going to crash the bike if it's a solo crash. And so when you look at life this way, how often do we grip onto life so firmly that we end up crashing our life? Because again, we didn't take the pivot. Every move was too drastic. It was last second. We weren't prepared. We didn't see it coming. And when you're riding a bike or running, how far ahead should you look down that road? Don't look at your front tire. Don't look at the immediate now only, because, when you're racing in triathlon, you're in this aero position. It's really uncomfortable to sit staring out at the road. So occasionally you do lower your head. It's a nice straight stretch of road. There's no obstacles. You lower your head. You rest a bit, but then you pick it up. You don't stay there for too long, but you also don't look all the way down the road, because then if you're, I'm assuming, because I didn't ride a course that was straight, but I'm assuming in Kona, long stretches of straight road. And if you just stare at the distance, I would imagine, like in a run, it never ends. You just perpetually see that goal, that end of the ride way off in the distance, minute after minute, hour after hour, and it just demoralizes you. But if you're looking 20 feet ahead of you in the near future, the next couple weeks, that is primarily where you should be looking. And if we don't do that, we start to crash our life. And because we're either looking too far in the future, we don't notice the obstacle that's right at our feet and we crash it, or we're looking too close and we don't prepare, and then we have to whip our bike, our life into this rapid direction, or we think we need to, and then all of a sudden we weren't supposed to do that. It was just a curiosity we should have just played with a little bit. So we pause. We realize, okay, I do need to go in this direction. So I pivot. I don't whip the bike. I'm not going to drastically change my life. Here's the rebrand. The rebrand is I'm going to get a drum kit and play it, maybe 10, 15 minutes a day when I get the chance to. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pursue it. And if that's too much, make another pause, pivot, and pursue. I'll do 5 minutes, one song a day. Or I'm like, I'm going to pause because I can do it more. I'm going to do 4 songs a day. Yeah. Pursue that. You're constantly micro adjusting those different areas in your life versus rapidly changing courses. And so that's kind of where, as you're rebranding your life, as you're choosing the new narrative you're going to live, it's really important when you get shaken up, when the winds, the crosswinds are blowing and the bike is wiggling and you want to grab real hard and right the bike, you have to let it shake a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to crash it. And when we take that time to pause and realize, okay, this bike is going to stay upright, I just have to not panic. Well, then we can pursue that path. The pivot is don't grip it. Yeah. Just breathe. Okay. And understand what's happening. So that's kind of how I use pause, pivot, and pursue in this instance. But it's a universal philosophy that really is my, I don't want to say coping strategy. It's my protocol for whenever I get really stressed, which we can get into that too.
I like that. And the idea of the pause there is so important, because anytime you're faced with some kind of fear or some change or something that's uncomfortable or anything like that, immediate danger. Yeah. I mean, you may need to react, but that rarely happens. But in times of those, in times where we're influenced by our own emotions or something that's in our way, pausing never fails. Taking that pause never fails. And I really like your analogy with regard to the bike course of looking at the finish line while you're still in the race, because there's a reason to think about the finish line. You know how far you're going to go. You know what the end goal is. But to obsess about it, especially in the moment of where you're at, that's where you do need to take it back and focus on the right now and looking where you're going immediately right now, so that you can do that. That's why I think you should really schedule your visionary time. Schedule your visualization. The idea of scheduling the long-term strategy so that you know where you're going. And in the day-to-day, focus on the right now, that next 5%. So you have those intentional moments of when you're focused on what's down the line and what's right now. Because for those of us who are higher achievers, who want to achieve more things, who want to do more things, who want to master the art of stuff, who want to pivot into a lot of different things, we're going to feel overwhelmed and we're going to feel frustrated when we're not doing everything that we want to do at every given time. We're going to get to the end of the day realizing that we didn't get everything in that we wanted to do. And so we have to be okay with pausing and pivoting and then pursuing something every day that's different, that may not be everything, but that we got some things in. Today I sang. I sang for 15 minutes. I practiced that. And tomorrow I'll play the banjo. And then maybe the next day I'll play some guitar and sing. and do a little bit more. But over the course of those days, the metric that I'm going to use to assess that is, am I happy? Am I growing? And am I finding this enjoyable? Because if it's all just about getting as much stuff in as you can, you're never going to be happy, never going to be fulfilled. The question is, am I just happy doing this right now? And that's so important.
I would ask that same question to the professional eaters, the hot dog eating contest. Are you really happy?
Am I happy right now?
Are you right? I bet you're not, because you got a lot of hot dogs in that belly. All of them.
On the plate.
Well, you're talking about so many things that I'm going to circle back to. The first one, I'll just go in reverse order. High achievers. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that, and I want to this is really important to me, because I took this test and it said I was a high achiever, mm-hmm. and I initially was like, throw that in the garbage, because I'm not. Mm-hmm. Until I looked at my life, and this is a message to a lot of I'm not a high achiever. You might be. You probably are. I think a lot of us are. We just use that energy in a destructive way. I was a high achiever when I could drink a 30-pack of beer in a day. I was a high achiever when I could beat every video game and play Guitar Hero on Expert. I practiced. It was just all of the things that I was investing my time in led to me becoming a high achiever in self-destructive narratives. I was a high achiever at telling myself the most negative and destructive story, mm-hmm. to ensure that I never did anything good with my life, because my life wasn't worth living. That's a high achiever. All of that energy given into a different direction, rebranded to believing in myself and getting to know myself, opens up a door that says, oh my gosh, I am a high achiever. I've just been mm-hmm. using that shadow to destroy my life instead of build my life. And now that I'm in that position where I am trying to build my life, and it's not attached to a timeline. It's not attached to a monetary value. There's no metric besides making a difference that I am striving for. And if I'm growing and serving in that way, money's going to come. Mm-hmm. Success will come. Like, it's going to come because I'm in line with purpose. And I'm a high achiever. Like, I want, and I'm driven to achieve. But now I'm driven to achieve positive things like Ironman and winning jiu-jitsu competitions and learning and going up in the rank because I'm becoming proficient, starting a podcast and being consistent. Like, I'm dialed in now. It's taken me years to consistently release episodes. I've started 2 or 3 different shows. I've iterated every time. Those aren't failures, though the high achieving negative told me it was. Well, now I realize they're not. It just wasn't the right show. And I had to keep bringing it forward. I never gave up on it. I just took long pauses, and I was pivoting all over the place. I didn't know it at the time. But then, as you say, well, you were iterating. Every single time you come back, hey, you're stepping back on the field. Good for you. What did you learn while you stepped off? What did that teach you? Because every time I fall apart, I come back stronger. And when I fall apart now, it doesn't last as long, and it's not as chaotic. It hurts real bad, and I have to use my protocols, because I still am that guy. I'm just a stronger version of that guy, a more focused version of that guy. And that's every single time we come back, we've rebranded. We just didn't know it. We just didn't know what to call it. But that's what we were doing. And that finish line, whatever that arbitrary thing is, if you get too focused on it and someone moves that finish line a mile down the road, you could have finished if it was a mile down the road. But now that it was moved and you know it was moved, you're going to fall. And Ironman France, I had to run past the finish line 4 times. And every time I did, I could hear the party. I could hear people finishing the race. And the music got louder, and the course got lonelier, and it got emptier. And all of those aid stations started to collapse and be taken back because I was one of the final finishers, last 10 minutes. It was a ghost town. But the party kept going. And I didn't believe I could make it to the party. But I kept walking. I was falling apart. And because I kept walking, I made it to the party. And it was the greatest party of all time. Because I thought I had failed, but because I kept moving, I ended up making it. And when that lady said I was about 600 meters from the finish line, I sprinted with everything I had left. Because I thought I had failed. I thought I had lost cutoff. I even told her, I'm like, did I miss cutoff? And she's like, no, you're in perfect position. Just go. And that surge. But I almost stopped. when I talked to her, but I walked. I slowed down to a walk and kept walking. And then when she told me go, game on. Everything I had left went to that. And I had passed that finish line so many times. And that time I went because I didn't stop. I didn't give up. And I fell into my wife's arms because I had nothing left. And then I cried and I screamed through pain. But the pain led to this joy because that pain makes you centered and it makes you ignore that finish line and say, I'm here right now. I need to handle this. I can't even bother with that finish line because the real battle is what I'm feeling right now. I have to deal with that. Or that finish line, who cares? But when you cross it, when you get there, that pain fades away and then you might still be crying. But it's a different reason to cry because you made it and you get to reflect on that.
Yeah. It becomes a point of reference for everything that you can be and have been. And I love that high achiever moment that you're talking about too. Like because I could so relate to that. The first time I was ever called a high achiever was one of my first days. It was like within my first month of going into Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I'd never heard that phrase before, especially attributed to me. But the sponsor that I got into, I was like, I did all of my step one and did everything he did. And I've been going to AA meetings every day. And he's just like, well, yeah, you're a high achiever. Like so matter of factly and almost like tongue in cheek. Like it was like, and I'm like, okay. But that was like the first time I thought about it. And I'm just like, yeah, that's true to the very point that you're saying, Eric. I've always been a high achiever, even when it comes to the drinking, to the bad stuff, to the alcoholism, to the drinking myself into blackouts and still surviving. I've made it 15 years being a complete degenerate alcoholic. And here I am today, sober. And so it was like that first moment of like, yeah, all right, let's do it. At all the way to the point of like that same finish line, those same finish line experiences, which are all like just so brutal. And yours is so beautiful. I mean, I love your finish line experience. It's so great.
That whole race was the most beautifully painful experience. But I mean, there was so much life understanding on that course. And one thing that I was talking to Eric Hill, my partner, co-founder of Project Echelon, on the last episode, was he loves endurance sport. One of the reasons that we do endurance sport for Project Echelon is it's unique. We Defy Foundation has the same probably mission for why they do jiu-jitsu and have their nonprofit in that. But he said that the reason he loves endurance sport is because of the uniqueness of shared suffering. And that really hit me too, because you and I, we've raced, we've done it at different levels, but we've both shared the suffering. We both know that pain. And there's a reason we don't commiserate, but we bond. Like that's the high achiever, is going to bond versus commiserate. And that shared suffering, we get each other. So I can tell you a story and it's going to hit you different than someone that's never been there. They might be inspired or wowed or whatever, but you're going to get it. You're going to be like, you'll feel it, in a different way. So it's important that as we go, that we do have these arenas where we can spend time with people who understand, because if I support someone in an industry I don't know, I can see them as a human. I can support them emotionally and talk to them about life and generalizations. Even if you're listening to this, you might not play drums, you might not do jiu-jitsu, you might not do triathlon, you might not be a veteran, or any of my shared life experiences, we can still communicate. But getting with people who know what you're going through, who have experienced that same suffering, does change the game. And those people have to want more for their lives. They want growth. If they don't, then that's where you start commiserating, because then you're just complaining about whatever the situation was. And that's not going to do anyone any favors. And this leads me to the final step, which is maybe the least sexy of all the steps, but one that makes me the most excited. And that is repeat as necessary. Because I don't care what path you're on. I don't care what your career is. If you're not flexible enough to start back over at one, holy hell, how did I get off this path? Like something's wrong here. Well, what have I been doing? Where am I going? What direction does this take me if I keep walking it? What did I stop? Oh my God, I'm not playing drums anymore. What the hell happened? Well, don't beat yourself up. Go play the drums. Like, it's been 20 years. I don't care. Go play the drums. Get a drum pad. Get some sticks, and bro, do it.
Yeah.
It's never too late to bring those things in, but we think it is because that time, that window is over. No, it's a constant cycle. It's the phoenix rising over and over again. It's completely realizing the stress was calling you to let new information in. And that new information of that chaotic moment is because you're not doing something you're supposed to be doing. You stopped, or you never even knew to bring it in. And now it's time for you to integrate that. You're now going to have awareness, and that's exciting. But that awareness is going to fade over months or a year. You got to repeat. It's just a constant cycle. So it never ends. And that seems unsexy because you want to take this one path, this one course, this one retreat, and now life makes sense. But every person I've ever talked to, myself included, after a week, it fades. That emotional excitement fades. Life kicks you in the teeth, and you don't know what to do. And so that's where it's unsexy. It's not marketable, but it's exciting. The fundamentals are exciting, and the fact that we get to repeat as necessary and go through those phases again means the game's never over. We're just doing laps, and that finish line is great, but it's the laps that change my life, and it's the victory of the finish line that makes me taste what it is to succeed and gives me that hunger, because I know there are these finish lines, but it's in the laps that we grow.
Yeah, that's where the joy is. That juice is in the journey, because it really is, because, at the finish line, I mean, we all treasure the finish line. We think this finish line is sexy. I mean, and we think that moment is going to define us, like the end of a movie where we're just satisfied, the credits roll, and then it's all over. It's all done. But our life's not over. Life didn't end when I crossed the Ironman World Championship finish line. Should I tell you about that? But
yeah, anyway. I heard about it once or twice. Yeah,
once or twice. Yeah, I try not to tell too much about it. But but when I crossed that finish line, it was like 15 seconds of, yes, I did it. Everything that I've been working for the last few years since I got sober is paid off to this moment and this culmination. Yep. Where's the pizza? And then that's really seriously what happened. I kid you not. As the person was leading me down the ramp from the finish line arches, I had finished my moment and was thinking about where the pizza was. I was like, brilliant. I've got to find that pizza right now. That was the most important thing at the moment. When for the previous 10 hours that I was on the course, finishing that race was the most important. So the point is that the finish line is just a momentary moment, and you're on to whatever's next. So while it doesn't seem sexy, this idea of iterating or repeating, that process of iteration, the idea that we can transcend even our dreams to become more than we ever expected is tremendously exciting. And we do that by rebranding ourselves. We do that by a constant state of rebranding. When we get to a level of something that we're happy with, and then we decide to move into something else or replay the drums or go into something else. This is a philosophy that's been put forward too by Benjamin Hardy, who recently wrote a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And in it, he talks about that growth that we can achieve, that 10X growth, that next level growth that we can achieve, that is bigger than just, growing steadily upward in a linear fashion. And it comes from letting go of the 80% of ourselves that is no longer serving us. 80% of us is the part of us that got us to where we're at now. And it's not serving our future self. But there's 20% of us that is driving us forward onto whatever's next. And if we can shift that and turn that into our ultimate, we can grow into something so much greater if we just embrace that idea. Not to think of rebranding as a failure, but as an opportunity to grow into that next 10x level of ourselves.
That 80%, 20%, I've heard that many times, and I don't think it really fully clicked in the way it just did like it did now. And what hit me was we're talking about fundamentals. Well, the fundamentals are the 20%. Mm-hmm. The fundamental of who I am as a person is that 20%. The rest, the drums, the jiu-jitsu, the Ironman, all these other elements of things, the acting, the movie, the filmmaking, the writing, that's all great stuff and it's part of me, but it's not the part that I'm building a future on.
Right.
It's not the part that has to be present at all of these moments. And that's really interesting because that's what I've been feeling recently is, who am I? Mark Twain, 2 important days in a man's life, the day he's born and the day he figures out why. It's because you figure out the fundamentals of who you are. Those
Who
are the
am
building
I?
blocks. Who am I? Yeah.
Who am
are
I?
you?
Who is this guy? Anyway.
Aquaman. The musical coming to your
Aquaman, yes. I am promoting Aquaman the musical.
Yes.
I will be playing Aquaman. And
oh, to fly in the sky, but I'm stuck beneath the tide.
am
and
I a
cry.
man
The
or
ocean.
am I a fish? Someone who will be served on a fancy dinner dish.
Under the sea. All of a sudden, Sebastian comes in and just ruins everything. Come on, that was an emotional moment, bro. So the minority of our life is actually the fundamentals and actually the most important thing in our life, and connecting to that truthfully. And I would say honing it. I would say polishing and getting the rust off, because I think a lot of those bits are still attached to affirmation and validation, and we're afraid. We've stuffed it away and we've built these other things on top of it, so we don't know how to use it. There was this poet that talked about this, that, you know, it's not what he was talking about, but it reminds me of these limbs are awkward, and I'm still learning how to use them. And, you know, if I knew how to use it, I could fight, and I don't. And so if I knew how to use my giftings, my fundamentals, I could fight. And fight means move on in life. It's a warrior way to say it. But if I could understand what I bring to the table innately because of who I am, I become more effective. That 10x, which I've heard again and never made sense to me until now, in that when I'm thinking, man, the more I'm me, the more powerful I become. And it's not, I'm going to be a CEO, I'm going to take over the world. It just means I'm going to be the strongest version of myself. And that's all I can do in this life. That's the only guarantee I have, is I get to show up and I'm sober. So you are guaranteed to get the truest version of me, for better or worse. Whoever you're talking to, Adam, when you see my face, it's me. Maybe I'm sad, maybe I'm happy, maybe I'm on fire, maybe I'm confused, but there's no chemical, there's no alcohol that's giving you a false perception of who this guy is. And when I get that dry, that sober, I can do some work. I can figure some things out, and that's unsexy as well. If I take one drink now, it's social. I can be social without it, as long as I know who I am. I can even walk away from the party and not feel bad. We're like, well, maybe if I have a few drinks, I'll enjoy talking to these people. No, I'm going home. You know?
Right. So, yeah.
It's just silly.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when you're this far removed from alcohol as we are, I mean, it seems like a silly notion, and certainly while you're in it, I'm not minimizing how deeply hard it is, because I was in it for 15 years, and seriously, when I got sober, I thought within the first year of sobriety, I thought I lost my best friend, but that in and of itself was a significant rebrand where I let go of 80% of myself. That's huge. What it's going to feel like. It feels like that when you let go of 80% of yourself. But looking at what you become, you're going to become somebody completely different, but you'll still be you. You'll be more of you. You'll be more of you than you've ever been. And that's the beauty of it. It's like you can look at yourself and say, all right, what is my current alcohol? What is that piece of me that is holding me back in that way, that I'm holding on to, that feels like a friend, but it's really a crutch that I can, because as I look back now, it's like, I don't even associate myself with alcohol. Like, I couldn't imagine drinking because it just does not sound so appealing. Like, why would I want to drink something that makes me completely goofy, want to sleep in till noon, wet the bed every night, and and not remember the entire night? Who would want to do that? And I was doing it alone. It wasn't even like an enjoyable process with anybody else. Like, why?
It's wild.
Yeah, it's nuts how we can condition our brain to like that. And I think that there are things we're doing now in our own lives that we can probably look at our 10-year selves looking back on us now that are saying the same things about something we're doing now. Like, maybe it's not hiring that social media manager. Maybe it's not doing this thing that's on our mind right now, or making this change, or we keep doing this like unhealthy thing that we should be moving into something different. But there's something now that our 10-year older self is looking back on us and saying, man, I couldn't imagine myself like that now.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end with this thought that just hit me again, because the 80%, why don't we? I know why I didn't. It's because getting rid of 80% of who we are, you're getting the real me. So now when you make fun of me, when you attack me, you're attacking the real me. Mm-hmm. There's an armor that is removed, and now everything hurts more. And when you remove a shell from anything, any kind of sea creature that needs to shed its shell, they're never more vulnerable. I mean, they have no protection. And all of these things, these coping mechanisms we build up are all built to protect us. And what person in their right mind is going to say, yeah, I want that. I want to remove all of my defense mechanisms and be potentially victimized and beat and hurt and attacked and everything is going to suck because it's me that you're talking about now. You're not talking about drunk Eric. It's real me. I was trying to be vulnerable, That sucks. And I went through that,
Yeah.
I went through that where I realized, oh man, I'm embarrassed about drunk Eric. Well, at least I'm sober Eric now, and I can move on, But if you make fun of the real me, well, that really hurts, and I don't know if I can come back from that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the more connected to that foundational you that you are, and you're willing to go through that pain, because what is the indicator for growth is discomfort. It's pain. It means you're trying to grow because something's not working. Well, you have to go through that. You have to build up the calluses. You have to go to fundamentals. You have to take that time to bring in the real things you love. Because if you don't bring in the things that you love and you're out there without your shell, there's nothing protecting you.
You're just Aquaman.
You're just Aquaman. You're just Aquaman. You're just water, man. It's just who you are.
Yep.
But you have to find these healthy things that, build up that new you in the real you. You're not hiding anymore. So to come out of hiding and into the light it's a terrifying thing. I don't want to minimize that either.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're able to connect, for me, I maybe don't know what to do. So I'm pausing and I'm pivoting. I like spooky stuff. So I'm going to read some scary books. I started reading scary books. I had never done that since Goosebumps in elementary school. So I'm like, I'll do that. And I enjoyed it. I read like 2 or 3 books and that was okay. Well, I'm moving on. And tarot cards. Let me get some tarot cards. I've always been curious about that. I used that and I got really into it for a while and I didn't build a business around it, but I did some readings and different stuff. And that was a fun thing. And it's still a part of my repertoire. I still like them and whatnot, but I pivoted away from that. Mm-hmm. And so I added something else, but that's, set to the side and drumming. I haven't done that in a long time. Bring that in, jiu-jitsu, all these different things. Some of them stick longer than others. And the commonality that I found in them, mind and body writes the life story. These things that stick with me challenge my mind and body in a way that I can't get enough of. Mm-hmm. And they transcend my emotional state when I can't figure out another way to do it, because it shifts me back to a connection to something I care about. And that something I care about is inside myself. It can't be something external. And this drumming is external. I'm doing it, but it's transforming something inside myself authentically, naturally, and it's spiritual to me. This transcendence has to be spiritual in nature. If it's not, then it's a chemical reaction from outside yourself. Yes, the brain has chemicals, so dopamine, serotonin, all that stuff, but you're creating it yourself by doing something that is good and healthy for you, and your brain is going to reward you for that. Same reason it rewards you for smoking a cigarette is because you like it. So it's going to give you that serotonin hit because the only way you're getting it is through this bad habit. Now you replace those bad habits with something good for you, like drumming or jiu-jitsu or running or triathlon. Well, now you're getting rewarded for some good stuff, and that's a pivot. You're pivoting away, and you're pursuing a new path, a new reward system, one that's actually going to elevate your life. So you have to start looking at these things. You have to start looking at what's gotten you here, what's not serving you, what needs to go, what you need to add in, what you need to enhance and give more time to because you love it. And oftentimes you have to look back at your childhood and say, what things were interesting to me before the world started to craft me and say, no, this isn't for you. This is for you. So this is good, but this is bad. Tarot cards are one of those things. Spooky things might be one of those things. Drumming, wasn't dedicated enough. So all of these things led me away from drums, led me away from music because I escaped. Well, now I can bring it back. I can redeem that. And when you redeem valuable parts of yourself, it will change your life. And sometimes, a lot of times, you have to first move your body. That's what I do in sport, is you start moving your body because you can take control of that, and then you can start to think about some of these other things. Do it without that, I call it an emotional chaser. We'll get into that whole topic. It's easier to sit down with these things, just like, you take a sip of Coke after a shot of whiskey. It goes down easier. Well, these emotional chasers are athletics. It's connecting to drums. It's disconnecting from the emotion so you can reconnect with the emotion with a little bit of objectivity and understand what it was there to teach you. Because emotions don't tell us to do something. They tell us to consider, to understand and seek information about what's happening, not to react. Take it into consideration, analyze it, and we'll cover that maybe next time. We'll talk emotional chasers, perhaps. I don't know. I'm trying to see. Look at that rebrand. I'm teasing stuff.
Ooh, sassy. I love it. I love it. It's so sassy, Eric.
Sassy Eric signing off.
Aquaman approved.
You wet? Anyway. Hey, producer, cut that one out. It's me. Until next time, stay dry and journey well, my friends.
Jiu-jitsu.
Forgot I have these buttons.